Hi everyone, Slapchop here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Daniel Avery album, Song for Alpha. Daniel Avery is a London electronic music producer who about 5 years or so ago dropped a fantastic little tech house album titled Drone Logic. It was his debut album for the Phantasy label. Prior to this record, I didn't even know who he was. So this album kind of put this dude on the map for me because it was loaded with these amazing drum sequences and grooves and the bouncy, rubbery bass lines. If you haven't heard a single track off of this record, I highly recommend the song Water Jump. That will get you hooked and just pulled through the rest of the way through the album. Just a really excellent electronic music experience. Great sound play, super clean, crisp electronics, fantastically dancey grooves, and I guess I enjoyed this record so much, I've just been kind of sitting here patiently awaiting some sort of follow-up, because somebody who would come out with a debut with this much great material on it and so much potential would surely have something great coming down the pipe very soon. But then it was 1 year after another year after another year and another year, and now it's finally here, and this album dropped. I didn't even notice it dropped. It actually came to my attention as a result of some fans of the show saying, hey, you reviewed that Daniel Avery all those years ago. Aren't you going to try his new one? I didn't even know what happened. Maybe I'm just a poser. Maybe I don't know shit about shit. But I finally got my ears on this thing, and I am seeing why it's not making quite the splash that his debut album did. This record is a total musical change, aesthetic change, which on paper is not necessarily a bad thing. I know. I get it. I like change, okay? But I guess I just don't see this album as a change in an interesting direction, or I guess I don't see what Daniel Avery necessarily brings to this style. While with his last album, he wasn't really reinventing the tech house wheel, I mean, it was superbly good tech house music. On Alpha over here, Avery is going in more of an ambient techno direction with a supremely industrial timbre to it. Like, the sounds coming out of the mix on this thing are super metallic, there's lots of reverb on them, nearly every piece of production on this thing sounds like it was pulled together on a factory floor. It sounds cold, it sounds frigid, it sounds robotic, it sounds even a little dystopian. Now, with it being ambient techno, the drums are pretty driving but very subtle, not quite as groovy or as hard-hitting as anything on Drone Logic. They don't really get tweaked across the length of a lot of these long tracks to kind of keep me engaged, keep me on the edge of my seat most of the time. Where I think Avery tried to put a lot of effort and attention and detail are into the washed out sounds that cover a lot of these beats, some of which have a kind of shoegazy tone to them, but not so shoegazy that I think this album could go toe-to-toe with any number of classic shoegaze albums, or any classic IDM or ambient techno records that have a similarly washy psychedelic sound, like Aphex Twin's Ambient Works 1 and 2, or Boards of Canada, GeoGaddy. It feels like Avery is pulling from that wing of electronic music pretty hard, but coming up short when it comes to, I guess, any interesting sound palettes or original ideas. Because for the most part, the sounds these beats are awash in is pretty digital, it's pretty bland, it's pretty flat, it's kind of thin. The sound play is really just so-so. There's very little on this album that inspires me to dive right into it, and the progressions are so tedious that the beginnings, middles, and ends of nearly every one of these tracks just kind of blend together into a kind of industrial, techno, nondescript ambient mush. There's also a macro problem with things blending together on this album as well, as there are very little in the way of distinct standouts on the track list here. I mean, the album is certainly pleasant to listen to, and it definitely fits the ambient techno mold, but only insofar as it can really only be enjoyed in an ambient fashion, because there isn't much to this record that really kind of keeps it in the forefront of my mind as I'm listening to it. I just feel like there was a bit of a missed opportunity with this record, given that the progressions aren't nearly as detailed or as physical as they were on Avery's last album. I think that there was a real opportunity to play with sound and craft some very unique and interesting sounds that listeners could really kind of get lost in with a more ambient type of release. But the sound play on this record is really just kind of average. There's nothing about the sounds of these beats and synths that to me reads as hypnotic or enveloping or relaxing or inviting. It just kind of feels like wallpaper, which in a way that is an element of ambient music, but I mean, the genre has become so much more since its inception, as has ambient techno itself, but I feel like Daniel Avery on this record has failed in two respects. He hasn't really captured the original wonder and magic of the genre at its core, nor has he advanced it in any direction that would keep things interesting. I'm feeling a strong 5-2 a light 6 on this record. Definitely not the standout that Avery's previous release was, nor does it really read to me as being that significant of a album in its particular genre. Transition. Have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best. You're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe, and please don't cry. Just leave an angry comment in the comments if you are angry. Over here next to my head is another video you can check out. Hit that up, or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Daniel Avery, forever.